Hello, 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 everybody. It's Shaun from Zoobox, and today we got our first, I believe it's our first, requested review. Yes, the Fractal Curve, a guy that's been around for a while, actually, almost since the beginning of Zoobox. He's always been very supportive, always leaves a lot of feedback, so thank you, sir. He requested, or suggested, really, that I check out 1993's Fearless. This film is directed by Peter Weir. If you don't know who Peter Weir is, kind of like a journeyman director. His most famous movie is probably Master and Commander. Most people would probably know him as a director from that film. It's written by Rafael Iglesias, based on a novel of the same name that he also wrote. It stars Jeff Bridges, Isabella Rossellini, Rosie Perez, Tom Hulce, John Turturro, a young Benicio del Toro, probably one of his first on-screen roles, John Delancey, and others. The little log line here on IMDb says, a man's personality is dramatically changed after surviving a major airline crash. I would say that's a little misleading, not totally misleading of a log line there. Little like the short synopsis, the short IMDb synopsis. Because what it's really about is not so much that his personality changes, it's that his worldview changes. He went through an event where, by all accounts, he should be dead. And was able to kind of walk away from it relatively unscathed. So this movie is really more about PTSD, I'd say, about survivor's guilt, and about the kind of the recklessness that can come after this, right? This is something I think if you've ever had a near-death experience, if you've ever been in any kind of like major accident, maybe if you were in the military, maybe if you're a soldier and you've ever been deployed, this is probably something maybe you've thought of or found yourself feeling like. This is actually very similar themes to something, just speaking of the military, something like The Hurt Locker. Kind of deals with the same kind of ideas. This kind of wild abandon, this kind of needing to prove to yourself that you're alive. Because you've brushed against death. You feel like you're dead. You feel like that old person was dead because now you're unencumbered by fear of mortality. And that's generally, and I would say in a general sense, is what Jeff Bridges' character is kind of going through. But the movie has much more broader aspirations than just being a specific character piece. I mean, I think if you were to go into this, you may think it's just going to be about kind of his psychological plight and some of the other people that were involved in the crash. But it actually takes a much broader perspective, which I thought was a good thing and a bad thing. Because it deals with, not just the people on the plane, it deals with the airline, it deals with the lawyers, it deals with family and friends and people trying to get settlements, it deals with people going to kind of support groups and trying to find healing through this experience, and it deals with the family members of the people that died on the plane in the plane crash and how they're dealing with it and like the support systems that can grow from that. Survivor's guilt, like I said, just can you let it go that you lived and somebody didn't? Because one of the, I would say, is almost like a co-lead. It's almost like kind of her story too. Is Rosie Perez's character, who's like a young mother whose child ends up dying in the plane crash, and she was like holding on to the kid as the plane was kind of going down, and she blames herself for living while her child did not make it, and it's a really heartbreaking thing. And if there is kind of a through line in the movie, and I think this kind of almost gets lost a little bit, because if it was a more character-centric piece and didn't really spend so much time with some of the external factors, I think it might have been made a stronger point with the characters. But it's about the relationships that develop between Jeff Bridges and Rosie Perez, like what their characters are going through, and can they help each other in a certain way, like they're connected now forever. And what you find out over the course of the film is that Jeff Bridges has kind of a similar reason to feel guilty about being alive. While on the plane, his business partner and his best friend ends up getting decapitated, like immediately. And he doesn't. He like survives, like I said, with like literally a scratch. He's got a scratch on his thing. And he goes kind of catatonic after this thing. And he just kind of starts revisiting old parts of his life, kind of living dangerously. He's deathly allergic to strawberries, so he starts eating strawberries and nothing happens, no allergic reaction. There's kind of a weird thing where it's like, I don't know if it's like actually supposed to be kind of spiritual or supernatural, or if that's just like a if there's like a psychosomatic part of the story about like kind of the power of trauma in your life and how that can actually even augment things like reactions to things you're allergic to. I'm not sure what case it's trying to make, honestly. I was not really clear on that. I don't think the movie, maybe, that's part of the kind of the texture of the movie, that it's not going to overly explain that stuff. So it didn't bother me that it didn't explain it, but I thought it was interesting. And Rosie Perez and Jeff Bridges, they kind of find out that they have like a little bit of a parasitic relationship, a little bit of holding each other actually back from really being able to find catharsis, really be able to find any sense of healing. Because he kind of, as Jeff Bridges is going on, he's going through like this kind of escalation of like risky things to do, He starts off with just eating strawberries, something he's allergic to, and then he's standing on the edge of a building, and then he's wanting to drive a building head first into a brick wall with Rosie Perez in the back. And they do these kind of mock thing where he wants to show her that it's not her fault. Like, she couldn't have held onto her baby tight enough to actually survive anyway, so she shouldn't feel guilty, because she starts going to this thing like, it is my fault. I let go of him for a second, and he wants to show otherwise. But anyways, yeah, so it's really interesting, and that it kind of even goes into the layers of like, the survivors almost like kind of being a negative thing, can be also a negative thing in each other's lives, in terms of like just not allowing you to get past that moment, the moment that you feel guilty about. And it was cool to see that explored. And I did like, even though I think it honestly, at the end of the day, I do think it kind of hurts the movie a little bit. Because most of the second act of the movie is dedicated to the family, friends, and the lawyers. Because it gets into it on that layer of like having to deal with a lawyer and having to get settlements and people angling for more money through this tragedy. Like they have Benicio del Toro, one of his first roles, like I said, is Rosie Perez's husband. And he's like trying to angle to get money. He's like, isn't my dead baby worth $2 million? I believe he actually even says on the phone. So it kind of shows you the different ways people perceive these kind of events and what it means to have lived through it or have to kind of be a passenger in the experience by being somebody's spouse or what have you. And there you have that in a few different ways, because you have like Jeff Bridges' best friend's wife. She's looking to get a big settlement because she doesn't have like a savings or whatever. I don't know. There's some sort of reason they're trying to tell you. And, but Jeff Bridges doesn't really want to be party to. He doesn't want to lie. Doesn't want to exaggerate about his experience on the plane. He doesn't feel like he has to. Like I said, he feels kind of unmoored from everything. And this causes strain in his personal life with his wife and whatnot. And I think like to focus on that stuff, if they had just kind of focused more on the characters. I mean, the lawyer and whatnot is a character, but he's not important really. It doesn't really make a difference to like the larger, I think, thematic message of the movie. Because all that stuff is within the character stuff. That's where that stuff kind of resonates. This idea of being able to move past trauma, to have catharsis, to what's the right way to put it? To have your moment, have that moment of confrontation when you confront this experience and just like to reinvigorate yourself in your life. Because you almost like when you have like survivor's guilt or this kind of PTSD on this level, it's like you feel like you're living on borrowed time. And they kind of make reference to this in the sense of like, you're dead. You're dead. You're just kind of, nobody else is ever going to be able to connect with you ever again after living through this. And that kind of stuff is quite effective. It's pretty powerful. I think like, if anything, I could say the performances are great. Even if I think the message maybe gets a little muddled because of all the external stuff that's going on. The performances are all pretty routinely great. Jeff Bridges, he's Jeff Bridges. He gives a solid Jeff Bridges performance. This is before he was like doing a Rooster Cogburn accent in every movie, but this is long before that. He's given a great performance. It's empathetic. It's off-putting at times. Like it's kind of interesting that you have like one of your leads and you're not sure if you like him, even though you can be sympathetic to the plight of what he's been through. He's kind of a dick. He's kind of an asshole, and I think that's part of the point. You know, when you're going through this kind of traumatic experience or the aftershock of a traumatic experience, almost like you go into this weird emotional catatonic state and you just don't know how to relate to other people. I've had like things like this in my life, not to this degree, obviously, but I can remember, you know, just not to overshare, but like, you know, when my father passed away, I had like a lot of people come over, a lot of friends reach out to me. I had my best friend came and hung out with me during that time, and I don't think I was really pleasant. I think I was kind of rude, almost short, blunt, and that's not normally how I am with people. Generally much more accommodating and whatnot. I've been saying whatnot a lot today. Sorry. I just noticed that. I was like, oh, why do I keep saying that? I guess it's appropriate, like it works, but get a thesaurus, buddy. Yeah, so I could see where the character was coming from, even on a personal level, and I definitely responded to that just emotionally. And then the whole Rosie Perez situation is just like, that's so heartbreaking. I mean, just the idea of like losing a child, and not only just like losing a child, but losing in that way where you feel like you are directly responsible for your kid's death. I mean, like, I can't even imagine. That goes beyond depression. That would go beyond suicidal thoughts, at least in my mind. I've thought about that. I've had moments like I had a really scary moment. This was like a year ago. Maybe not quite a year ago. I'll share some personal anecdote here. My kid got out of my house. It was like one of these freak times. We just like didn't lock the door. I was home alone with him, and I went to the bathroom, and I put on, you know, his TV show, got him his breakfast, got him situated. Didn't think of anything. It was kind of routine. We did this kind of thing every morning. And I'm going to the bathroom. I'm in there for 5, maybe 10 minutes. And, you know, all of a sudden I'm like, it's really quiet. I should go check. And I can't, he's not there. I'm like panicking. I'm all greasy. I hadn't taken a shower that day. I'm in my underwear. I'm like a tank top, and I turn the corner of my kitchen where I can see like outside my like front door, and the door is fucking open. The door is open. My heart drops into my stomach immediately. I am freaking the fuck out. I go out my front door. I can't, he's not there. He's not there. And we don't live in a bad neighborhood or even a particularly busy one. Kind of like a blue collar one, but there are bad parts of town. And I was just, and it was also expansive enough where he could have gone any direction. There were so many choices for him to gallivant down, to frolic through, right? And I was just in my underwear at fucking 8:30 in the morning, just like panicking, running down the street in my neighborhood. And luckily, obviously, everything ended up being okay. But all the thoughts that went in through my head during those few minutes, ooh boy, let me tell you. Because even then, even this, like if I had gone left instead of right, like I wouldn't have seen him. I think about that to this day. That'll really give you some. Make sure you lock the door. I'll tell you that much. And all the thoughts that went through my head, like I was like, well, it was pretty dark. I was like, well, if anything happened to him, I think I might have to kill myself. I don't know if I could live with myself if I was responsible, like that kind of directly responsible, like my own negligence made something like that happen. I don't know if I could live with myself. So when I was watching this movie, I totally connected into the headspace that Rosie Perez's character would have been feeling, having actually lost her child, and feeling responsible for it, feeling directly responsible for it. I can't even imagine having to kind of live through that experience. I never want to. I don't. Hope I never have to. But so there is, and I think there is some really powerful, interesting stuff in here. Is it a flawed movie? Yeah, I do. I think it's a little flawed. I think it's trying to examine too many aspects of loss. Things kind of get muddy along the way until the third act. Like, it feels like it really has to rush things in the last, 40 minutes to try to, kind of develop certain things that are not maybe properly developed beforehand, because we're dealing with all these other factors. Still interesting, though. If you've never seen Fearless, I would say it's totally worth your time. Totally worth checking out. If you like a good drama, especially a good early 90s drama, it's great. Super, super entertaining. Very thoughtful. Gave me a lot to think about for sure. I'm still thinking about it. I watched it 2 days ago. Usually I would end up recording a video right after, but I just haven't been able to. And having even the time to just kind of sit with it and think about its themes, think about the characters and the plight of their characters. And yeah, I'm really glad I watched it. So thank you to the Fractal Curve for suggesting I check this movie out. Because it was weird. He had said that, and I was thinking about Fearless a few days before. And I've never really seen Fearless. I'd seen parts of it. I was familiar with the iconography. I was familiar with him walking out of the cornfield with the baby, and I couldn't remember. It's this is a supernatural movie. Was he really dead the whole time? Is this a Jacob's Ladder movie? Although, in a weird way, this would make a decent double feature with Jacob's Ladder. If you've never seen the film Jacob's Ladder, Adrian Lynn's Jacob's Ladder starring Tim Robbins, check that out too. That would make a good double feature with Fearless, because in a lot of ways they're about coming to terms with your life. And yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a request, just like our friend Fractal Curve has today, leave it in the comments and I'll throw it on the list. All right, everybody. You have a great one.